The letter was not addressed to him. He knew that even as his fingers broke the wax seal, a seal he recognized with a cold, sinking dread, for it bore the crest of a man who had no business writing to anyone inside Ashford Manor, least of all to her. The candles in the library had burned low, their light guttering against the velvet dark of the November night, and Lord Edmund Ashford, the Duke of Ravensmere, stood at his mahogany escritoire with the feeling that the world, as he had carefully constructed it, was about to collapse entirely. He unfolded the letter. His hands steady in battle, steady at the card table, steady through every funeral and every negotiation and every cold silence his father had ever dealt him, those hands trembled now. "My dearest Evangeline," it began, "come to me before the week is out. The plan is set. If the Duke will not release you from the betrothal, we shall release ourselves, and England be damned." Edmund read it twice. Then he set it down upon the desk with the precise, deliberate care of a man who is holding himself together by the thinnest remaining thread of his composure. Evangeline Voss, his betrothed, the woman with the grey eyes and the ink-stained fingers and the laugh that arrived always a moment before he expected it, the woman he had spent the better part of 6 months pretending not to love, because a Duke of Ravensmere did not love, he contracted, he acquired, he arranged, and yet here was a letter in another man's hand, and here was the proof that she had been corresponding with Lord Felix Hargrove, the very man whose gambling debts had caused a scandal so devastating that 3 families in London still would not speak his name aloud. And here was Edmund, alone in his library, with nothing but the cold draught seeping beneath the door, and the terrible weight of what he now knew. He did not sleep that night. By morning, the house was astir with the kind of quiet that precedes catastrophe. The servants moved with their eyes downcast. The housekeeper, Mrs. Pelham, had received word from the village, whispers, always whispers in the country, that a magistrate's man had been seen on the road toward the Hargrove estate some miles hence. Edmund had sent him there. Edmund had acted before dawn, with a coldness so absolute it frightened even himself. He found Evangeline in the rose parlor. She was seated beside the window, her ivory morning gown pooled about her like something poured from a great height, and she was reading, or pretending to read, for she had not turned a page in some minutes. She knew, he thought, she could feel it in the air between them, thick as the coming frost. "My lord," she said, and set her book aside and rose. Her countenance was composed. It was one of the many things he had never been able to decide whether to admire or distrust. "Sit down, Miss Voss." "I prefer to stand." "I said sit down." A pause. She sat, but her grey eyes held his, unflinching, and something inside his chest turned over like a stone. He placed the letter on the table between them. He watched her face. She looked at it for a long moment. She did not flinch. She did not weep or protest or reach for denial the way he had half expected, half feared she might. Instead, she lifted her gaze back to his, and in it he saw something that confounded him entirely. Not guilt, not cunning, exhaustion. The deep, bone-deep exhaustion of someone who has been carrying a secret until it has bent them nearly in two. "You were never meant to find that," she said quietly. "No, I imagine not." "Edmund, do not." His voice came out harder than he intended. He turned away, toward the window, toward the iron-gray sky of November. "Do not use my Christian name as though it is owed to you." "Felix Hargrove is my cousin, my mother's sister's son. He is in trouble, my lord, terrible trouble. He borrowed money from men who are not gentle about repayment, and I was trying to help him. The letter was not—" She stopped, steadied herself. "It was not what you believe it to be." Edmund turned back to her. He studied her face with the merciless attention of a man who has been deceived before and survived it only barely. He wrote, "Come to me, the plan is set." The plan to emigrate to America, to remove himself from the reach of his creditors and begin again. I have been quietly arranging passage for him. The funds were mine, from my mother's bequest. That is all it was. That is all it has ever been. And here, dear listener, I must pause, because if this story is moving something in you, if you find yourself leaning closer, holding your breath for Edmund and Evangeline, then this is precisely where I ask you to do one small thing. Please like this story and subscribe to the Duke's Lost Letters. New episodes every week, each one a world of its own. Now, back to our Duke. The silence that followed was extraordinary. He could hear the fire settle in the grate. He could hear, faintly, the wind pressing itself against the old stones of the manor. He believed her. God help him, he believed her. And he believed her not because the explanation was convenient, not because he wished it to be true, but because he had looked into her eyes and seen no deception there, only the weariness of a woman who had tried to do right by someone she loved and had been caught in the machinery of it. But it was too late. He had sent the magistrate's man. The summons had been issued. Felix Hargrove would be taken before nightfall.
Edmund sat down. For the first time in memory, the Duke of Ravensmere sat in the presence of another person and did not bother to arrange himself into something imperious and untouchable. He simply sat and pressed his fingers briefly to his brow and thought. "What have I done?" he said. It was not a question. Evangeline crossed the room. She knelt beside his chair, a scandalous posture, wholly improper, the sort of thing that would have made half of London expire from the impropriety of it, and she took his hand. Her fingers were cool and ink-stained and utterly real. "You can still stop it," she said softly. "If you go now, if you go yourself." He looked down at her hand in his. "There will be talk," he said. "There is always talk. They will say I obstructed justice for the sake of a woman." She held his gaze. "Will you?" And Edmund Ashford, the Duke of Ravensmere, who had never in his life done anything so ardent or so reckless or so thoroughly beneath his station, stood up. He called for his horse. He rode hard through the November morning, the frost-white fields blurring past him, the bare black branches of the oaks reaching overhead like the arms of supplicants. He reached the magistrate's man on the lane before the Hargrove estate, reached him just as the poor wretch was raising his fist to knock upon the door. "Stand down," Edmund said, reining in hard. His breath came in clouds in the cold air. He looked magnificent and wild and wholly unlike himself, and he did not care. The man gaped. "Your Grace, the warrant." "Take me to the prison," the Duke growled, "but let her go free." He dismounted. He held out his wrists. "If there is an account to be answered for those debts, if there is a crime in the arranging of funds to remove a man from harm, then I am the one who arranged it. I am the one who authorized the passage. Log my name, not hers, not his, mine." It was a lie, a magnificent, deliberate, ruinous lie, and he told it with his chin up and his dark eyes steady, the way he had told the truth every day of his careful and correct and loveless life. They did not take him to prison in the end. A duke's word carried weight that a warrant could not quite overcome, and the magistrate, when applied to directly, found himself persuaded that the matter was resolved. Felix Hargrove sailed for America 6 days later. Edmund returned to Ashford Manor as the winter dark came down. Evangeline was waiting in the drive. She had not gone inside. She stood in the cold with her shawl clutched about her shoulders, her grey eyes bright, and when he dismounted, she walked toward him, not running, that would have been too much, but walking with the swift, purposeful step of a woman who has decided something and will not be turned. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "No," he agreed. "I wanted to." She looked at him for a long, searching moment. Then, "Edmund." He let her use his name this time. He let it settle over him like something warm, like candlelight on cold stone, like the first real thing he had felt in years. "Evangeline," he said quietly, "I find that I would very much like to break approximately a dozen rules of propriety, if you would permit it." She tilted her face up. The first snow of winter was beginning to fall, soft and silent, catching in her dark hair like scattered stars. "I would permit it," she whispered. And so it was, in the cold and the candlelight and the long, honest aftermath of a scandal narrowly survived, that the Duke of Ravensmere learned what he had never been taught, that love was not an arrangement, not a contract, not a carefully managed alliance between two ancient names. It was a letter broken open in the dark. It was a lie told to protect someone. It was riding hard through November frost because a woman had taken your hand and said, "You can still stop it." And you had believed her, wholly, without reservation, for the first time in your life. That is all love has ever been, after all, the willingness to be ruined for the right person. If this story found its way into your heart today, dear listener, then you already belong here, and I would be so honored if you would like this episode and subscribe to The Duke's Lost Letters. Every week, another world, another secret, another love that refuses to be respectable. Ring the bell so you never miss a letter. Until next time, may your heart be brave and your secrets be kind.